The Russell Westbrook era is over. Kyle, we have a trade. We have a Woj bomb. What can you tell me? What happened in the NBA tonight?
Well, so here's the full trade. I'm just going to lay it out here before we break down piece by piece. The Utah Jazz received Russell Westbrook, Juan Toscano-Anderson, that's NBA champion Juan Toscano-Anderson, Damian Jones, and a 2027 first round pick from the Los Angeles Lakers. Going back to Los Angeles in a 3-team trade is D'Angelo Russell, Malik Beasley, and Jared Vanderbilt. And then going to Minnesota in exchange for D'Angelo Russell is Mike Conley, preseason Hall of Famer Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and 3 future second-round picks. I believe one's from the Lakers, 2's from the Jazz. It's some combination of those. But those are the full details of the 3-team trade to get a kickoff on this trade deadline Thursday.
So what'd you think of the trade? Any outright winner?
I don't think there's any outright loser. Now, that can change with time, but from the looks of it, it seems like everyone kind of got what they were looking for. I know that if we take away the money and we take away the needing to make the numbers work or players work or salary, roster spots work, if we're evaluating this based on value, essentially the Lakers traded a first-round pick for D'Angelo Russell and then flipped Russell Westbrook for Malik Beasley, which... One, I can't believe Russell Westbrook is only worth Malik Beasley. Like, how did we get to this place where that's a possibility in a trade?
But you say that with the idea of what Russell Westbrook was, not what Russell Westbrook is.
Yeah, just incredible that we've gotten to this place from him winning MVP about 6 years ago to being a really good NBA player about 3 seasons ago when he was in Houston. And everything that's happened post-pandemic has been the decline of Russell Westbrook that people like Colin Cowherd knew was going to happen because like his game is so predicated on athleticism. And look, if you're the Lakers, essentially trading a first-round pick, which is protected if you get lucky and land a top 4 pick in the lottery. That's the reason it's top 4 is because they draw ping pong balls for the top 4 picks. So, like, giving up a first-round pick for D'Angelo Russell, who's on an expiring contract, I expect the Lakers are going to pay to re-sign him, even if it's overpaying to re-sign him, because they can't really afford to just lose him for nothing at the end of the day. So, like, trading a first-round pick for D'Angelo Russell isn't the worst thing in the world if you're the Lakers. And The rest of the players are nice pieces. I mean, Malik Beasley's the 7th man off the bench, which I guess is kind of what Russell Westbrook was prior to this trade going down. So, the rest of that's kind of in between. If you're Minnesota, I mean, you get basically 3 second-round picks, Mike Conley, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker in exchange for not getting the first round pick from the Lakers in the D'Angelo Russell trade. So I think if you're Minnesota, you'd rather take the Mike Conley, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and 3 second-round picks than a first-rounder, just because you're trying to compete now. And those 3 second-round picks and Nickeil Alexander-Walker give you more flexibility going forward than a single first-round pick. So I think that Minnesota did okay at the end of the day. They flipped an expiring contract in Russell for Mike Conley, who's under contract for 2 seasons, slightly older, slightly worse than D'Angelo Russell. But I'd say at Mike Conley's peak, he was about the same peak as D'Angelo Russell. Yeah. So, pretty similar point guards in that swap.
I think the thing we can say outright is these pieces seem like a better fit for what works well around a LeBron James-led team, what works with a team that has Anthony Davis on it. Because from the very start, from the very moment that Russell Westbrook trade went through, there was a lot of people that turned their heads at it and like, wait, what? You have LeBron already. Why do I need Russell Westbrook, who's a worse, athleticism? They were similar at the time, but a worse version of what LeBron does in every respect. That's what Russell Westbrook was. So it just felt odd to retread him and try and run out an offense, especially when they were all in the starting lineup. I'll say this might actually have been Russell Westbrook's best year as a Laker between the two, because coming off the bench, it seemed like a more natural fit. And you saw some moments, some flashes where it seemed to come through, but it was just the boneheaded turnovers, times in which Russell Westbrook failed to defer to the other stars on the team, and it just hurt the team chemistry. And then just the outright lack of ability, because yes, Russell Westbrook, a great talent and has tons of ability, but not the ability you needed You needed a shooter. I know it sounds like a casual take to say you needed a shooter, but you needed one. That's what works for this team. From a floor spacing standpoint, that's what this team needed. And they got that with the pieces they acquired. Vanderbilt, nice little addition there. D'Angelo Russell, like he's about shooting with 39% from 3-point range. So he'll be able to work well within this offense. And even a piece like Malik Beasley, another guy who can occasionally hit from deep. They needed this. I don't know if it makes them a better defensive team, because that's another one of the issues that this Lakers team has faced. But I do think that it's an upgrade. I'd rather have the depth, because you mentioned Juan Toscano-Anderson, former champion Juan Toscano-Anderson. They shouldn't be in situations where a guy like him is getting run out there as often as they had to for the Lakers. So I think it's a great trade for them at bare minimum. And we talked about this, does it make them a championship team? No, but I believe them as a playoff team again. I had no faith in them even making the playoffs or even sniffing the playoffs before. If you did nothing, if you stagnated at all this trade deadline, then it literally is you just taking a knee and waiting out the clock on this season.
Well, think about it this way. D'Angelo Russell was the third scoring option on the 10th seed in the Western Conference. And now going to the Lakers, he will probably still be the third scoring option on the 10th seed in the Western Conference. So if that makes the trade a little bit more simplistic, I understand that there. And then Utah's like, we'd rather use our cap space to acquire a first round pick instead of having these players. Because what's interesting from the Utah standpoint, and I know you're really fascinated with Utah as someone who's a Danny Ainge enthusiast from his time in Boston.
Trader Danny got another first.
Got one more first, and all it took was just absorbing cap space. And
some protections. Let's not forget there is protections on that first round pick.
Yeah, there are protections. The Lakers would have to be outright tanking, but to be fair, the Lakers did this before. They had protections on all those lottery picks in the mid 2010s. But the Utah part is interesting because Malik Beasley and Jared Vanderbilt don't represent the future for Utah, because the future is so far in advance for them. And what's interesting is that those roster spots are actually more valuable going into next year, because it provides them flexibility with either those draft picks or the developmental players that are going to probably fill the roster. Because when they did this teardown, they anticipated that they were going to be bad. And what ironically happened was that they got so many players in exchange that they ultimately were still able to put together a not worst in the league product. And part of that is Larry Markkanen's development, obviously, but another part of it is guys like Beasley and Vanderbilt occupying deep parts of the bench. This is a very similar situation to Oklahoma City when they had that one season with Chris Paul where they made the playoffs, even though they had like a 1% chance of making it to start the season. And it's just because when you get rid of that superstar player, you're getting back enough in return that the team is still going to be good. This Utah's continued teardown is going to be flipping those type of players for draft picks, because it's going to give them the flexibility to really start bottoming out and filling the roster with players who might have a chance of being on the team 3 years from now, which, as nice of pieces as Beasley and Vanderbilt are, they weren't going to be on the team 3 years from now.
I kind of feel like Minnesota is the least talked about since this deal got done. What do you think of them? Gained Mike Conley back, obviously aging veteran, has had promise throughout his career, but in the playoffs has come up short. Does it do anything to move the needle for them at all?
Here's what I have to say about Minnesota. Doesn't move the needle either way. I mean, D'Angelo Russell was averaging 17 points a game. Mike Conley's averaging 15 points a game. I like Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I thought he was going to be really good, and that didn't turn out to be the case. I think he's on like his 6th team in 5 years now, but you know what? It's not really that much of a difference for them. Yeah. Conley's going to slide in exactly where D'Angelo was. It will be interesting once all those players get back together. I know at one point Towns was hurt and then Gobert was hurt, and they've never really been together at the same time. It'll be interesting once playoff time comes around, because their bigger thing, other than needing a stable point guard, is they got to turn that offense over to Anthony Edwards. And especially they need to turn it over to Anthony Edwards if they're going to be playing in the play-in and aren't going to be guaranteed a first-round series.
Now, is it hyperbolic to say that the Russell Westbrook trade was a top 25 disaster in NBA history?
Well, 25, you're giving me a lot of room to
I
work
do want
with,
to kind of give you a little bit of room, because I don't want to be over the top, because I know there's going to be a lot of people rushing to Twitter to say it was like the worst trade in NBA history. But I'm sure if we really were to break out the NBA encyclopedia, we could probably find some worse ones, and certainly some worse ones in the margins.
Well, especially off the margins is a big part of this. Because if we're thinking about the biggest like trades that flopped, you could think of Dwight Howard going to the Lakers. You could think of obviously the Brooklyn Nets, Boston Celtics trade that netted Boston, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown.
Another Brooklyn Nets trade, whatever they've done recently with the James Harden one. I guess they got some prospects back, but heck, yeah.
I mean, Brooklyn kind of turned out okay in that one with 2 first-round picks and Seth Curry and Ben Simmons. It's not the worst thing in the world given where James Harden is, but I think everyone's going to end up losers in that one. The thing that's interesting about Russell Westbrook is that the Lakers didn't give up anything that really hurt. Like
they would disagree with you outright.
Look, Kyle Kuzma's a nice player. Like, Kyle Kuzma's a very nice player. He's the third best scoring option on a team that's 12th in the Eastern Conference right now. So obviously they would like to have Kyle Kuzma. I'm not saying that they just are outright like, who cares that we lost Kyle Kuzma for Westbrook. But it's not like Washington walks out of that trade like, oh my God, we made out so great. Washington's kind of just like, we did whatever in that trade. Like, the fact that experiment with Westbrook failed so hard that feel like the Lakers just want to wash themselves clean of everything that happened there. And it's like everyone ended up either not happy or kind of where they were. Cause like, I don't think Washington's like thrilled at everything that turned out there.
Well, the thing is, you just can't look at the players that went towards Washington either. You have to look at what Russell Westbrook's contract did to the Lakers roster. They weren't able to keep a guy like KCP or Alex Caruso. And those are the type of players they needed, just come off the bench, because not only were they a struggling offensive team because of their limitations from a shot making standpoint, but they were a horrible defensive team last year. They got a little bit better this year. I think at one point they were in the top 10 defensively. Don't know if that's changed at all since, but I do look at this team and like look at the players that could have been on this roster had Russell Westbrook not been on this roster. And the fact that he was a negative for this team, I think highlights just how much of a disaster it was.
And this is what I said the day that the trade went down. You can go back on the Take It Easy podcast through hundreds of episodes of archives, which is, you make this trade, there is no out. Like, Westbrook is on your team for the next 2 years, and this is the core of your team. Like, you can change the pieces around the outside, but this is it. This is what you've got. And I thought going into the 2022 season, them and the Nuggets were the 2 best teams in the Western Conference. The fact that they went from that to missing the playoffs outright shows just how objectively of a failure that experiment was.
So out of like all the more recent big threes that we've seen, I guess, where do you place this one? Because I'm thinking, again, recent ones here. We have KD, Kyrie, James Harden getting together. We have the combination they try to form with the Timberwolves. Let's see, another big 3 that comes to mind.
I mean, people
Nash,
feel like
Kobe, Dwight Howard.
And
when we compare those big 3s, where do you think this ranks?
I mean, the Darren Williams, Joe Johnson, Kevin Garnett experiment with Brooklyn didn't turn out great either. It's just been rough for Brooklyn, man.
I guess they got a playoff series win out of it, right? If I'm remembering right, they got 1 playoff series win. Even the new iteration Nets got 1 playoff series win out of their big 3. This one, struggling to make a play-in, not making a play-in,
It's an abject failure, and there's no real way around it. Because the expectations were set so high. Like, I'd argue if you're Chicago, paying $600 million for DeMar DeRozan, Lonzo Ball, Alex Caruso, and Zach LaVine to win a single playoff game is not the best use of your money. But there was no expectations around that Bulls team. I think that's why we don't think of that as much of an abject failure. I think the expectations of a LeBron James, Anthony Davis team that won the championship in 2020 is why this is such a failure.
Well, there it is. The first name out of your mouth alone, LeBron James, greatest player of all time in some people's minds, is part of one of the biggest failure big 3s. The man that created the big 3 concept is part of one of the biggest failures of Big Three history.
Welcome to the end of your career, buddy, because the same thing happened to Michael Jordan in Washington. Same thing happened to Kobe Bryant with the Lakers. Man, like, you just can't build a team around 36-year-old aging stars, and especially coming off of Achilles tears like Kobe Bryant. But in fairness to the Lakers, they got a championship out of 35-year-old LeBron. It was only 38-year-old LeBron that ended up being their downfall. And also, the Anthony Davis thing is just so weird. In the bubble, he was one of the 10 best players, if not 5 best players in the NBA. And when he's been healthy the last 2 of the last 3 years, ignore last year, when he's been healthy 2 of the last 3 years, he's played like a top 10 player in the sport according to player efficiency rating. I mean, it's just a weird situation there. I mean, it's up there, man. There's no way to look at it other than a failure. We're gonna think of this, and I think just because they're the same team, it's easier. We're gonna think of this the same way we think of Dwight Howard, Steve Nash, Kobe Bryant in 2012 with the Lakers. That's gonna be the ending legacy of Russell Westbrook, Anthony Davis, and LeBron James.
I guess there's probably gonna be a lot of Lakers fans that tune into this one specifically, so I'll leave it to Lakers fans. Which was the worst Big Three in your mind? Was it the Kobe, Dwight, Nash combo, or was it this AD, LeBron, Russell Westbrook combo? I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comment section. Leave a like on the video. Subscribe to our channel if you enjoy this conversation. Follow us on all our social medias. From Juju, Kyle, stay safe, happy, and healthy, and we'll see you on the next one.